If you're not sure where you're at, this is a planning and zoning meeting. I didn't think we'd have that many people here today. But, our first order of business are 2 sets of minutes dated April 18th and January 16th. We'll take both of those together and we can see if there's any comments, additions, or corrections to them. Chair would call for a motion for approval. Motion by Mr. Elkins. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kovash. Any corrections or additions to those minutes? I think we've had plenty of time to look at them. Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes approved. Regular agenda, our first item is a preliminary plat. It's to consider a preliminary plat for West Ridge Second Edition. Site is generally described in the south half of Section 36, Township 140 North, Range 97 West, and a portion of the southwest quarter of Section 31, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 357 acres. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I'm Larry Nygaard from Roars Development, here to talk again today about the West Ridge Second Edition. We had a lively discussion about a month ago that stopped short of approval, I think, when we had failed to visit with the Park District about our plans and the dedications and how to involve the Park District in our plat. We have since done that. We've met with them and we've begun discussions on what we hope ends up in a dedication of land within a next phase of our development. And in the alternative, if that doesn't work out, we've agreed to just do a payment in lieu. So I think we've addressed that issue. At least from our standpoint, we continue to work with them and we'll have a resolution soon, I think, on how to proceed with that.
Thank you, Mr. Nygaard. This time, are there any questions or comments for Mr. Nygaard? I'd have one comment from, I'd ask Mr. Kovash what his opinion is of the comments.
That is correct. We took cash in lieu for West Ridge 1, West Ridge 2, and 3, which we haven't seen 3 yet, but we would like to take land, but the land that we would like is in West Ridge 3. But that has not been annexed yet. So if the city were not to annex, I think I'm saying this correctly, Larry, if they were not to annex West Ridge 3, we would take cash in lieu for West Ridge 2. So yes, I mean, it has been decided that that is what we're going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Kovash. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Nygaard.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
I think those comments by Mr. Kovash are important, that we have that understanding. I think we need to make sure that gets in the record. I'm ready to approve the plat. A couple of detail things that I just want to mention just to get on the record, but I'd really encourage our engineering staff to really look at the 15th Street corridor, both from a standpoint of right-of-way width being adequate, where that right-of-way is located, and even the alignment. And this involves 15th to the east of this subdivision as well, but I think I just would encourage our engineering staff to take a look at that. Another detail thing, you know, I know that the idea of an overhead on 50th is probably far in the future, but we may want to have some arrangement on this plat so that we know we can build an overhead there someday. So I'd suggest that staff look at that. I know there are utility easements missing on the plat. That has to be looked at. The biggest thing I wanted to say this morning, and it doesn't It doesn't affect just the Westridge Second. It affects any of the, we're going to look at a couple of other significant plats today, but I think everybody's read about where we may be headed with infrastructure funding from the legislature right now. If that doesn't change in these last couple of weeks of the session, we're going to have a problem, I think, with infrastructure on these significant plats. I think something's going to have to give, that we as a city are probably going to have to make a tough decision as to which plats, which subdivisions see infrastructure extended and which ones don't. Because I don't see us having the financial resources to extend infrastructure to all these subdivisions. And again, it's directly related to this House Bill 1358 and what funding comes back to Dickinson and other communities in North Dakota and western North Dakota as well. So I think we've got to recognize that in the record, that even though we may be approving Westridge and the other two significant plats we're looking at this morning, there's a real question about getting infrastructure to them. But I am ready to approve it otherwise.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Jackson. And at this time, being he brought up engineering, I'd like to introduce Mr. Bill Watson. It's the first time for him on this commission from City Engineering. So I'm sure he's aware of all that.
Hello.
Thank you. There have been a lot of conversations about the legislature and what we're going to get back from them and how we're going to be able to use it and what they want to give us. And we can do, and I was talking with some of the other commission members before the meeting about a few things in that light about we can do all the planning, and the planning can be very good, but if the money isn't there, there's going to be a list of priorities that's probably going to have to be developed for which subdivisions are going to go and which aren't going to go based on how the infrastructure is going to be able to be gotten. And it's outside of our realm to talk too much about cost sharing. That is City Commission's woeful duty. But for some of these projects that have been planned and planned out very well, who's actually going to pay for the infrastructure so we don't incur a debt and a risk upon the city that's not being, could be taken care of in the future? There's going to be a question mark on all of these subdivisions. I'd ask at this time if there's anyone in the public who would like to make any further comments on this preliminary plat. Feel free to come forward to the mic. Anyone else from the commission wish to make any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like
Mr.
to ask
Elson.
Ed Cortana a question. Ed, have they been guaranteed annexation in this property?
The property itself is within the annexation area.
It is,
I mean-
but it has not been annexed at
Oh, no, okay. That would be part of the development agreement, my fault. I was thinking of the urban service area.
So no permits would be issued for building until annexation took place or until the infrastructure
Absolutely.
needs
Well,
are met, right?
yes, when you look at the conditions, there's a plethora of conditions. I think we have 25
Yeah.
that are there.
And they understand that, the developer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Nygaard understands that, you know, for us to move forward with it, there are a lot of question marks. And, you know, as the chairman has mentioned today, cost sharing, they're aware of that issue of paying for a fair proportionate share for off-site sewer, water, and water tank that would be necessary for this particular development. Those are all to be determined. We have conditions, we have the development agreement to address a lot of them, but we also have specific conditions. And if we cannot come to an agreement with respect to that, this development may not come to fruition. So that is true with Pinecrest as well, or delayed until such a time as we have that ability to move there. As a city, we're moving as quickly as we can to provide those necessary upgrades to our sewer and water lines to provide that, but we're several years out with respect to having that in that area to a capacity to be able to accommodate these developments along with Pinecrest. So the timing issue is going to be very critical that we're going to have to address as part of the development agreement, and those will be part of further negotiations that we will have.
Okay, thank you, Ed.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Corton, would you like to make further comments on this preliminary plat at this time?
Mr. Chairman, as staff, we would recommend approval. As I've noted on the prior comment, that there are a lot of conditions. This is the same for, this will probably be pretty typical of developments as we move forward. The developments that are occurring or will be coming up in the next several months to a year, probably the vast majority of them will be dealing with the same kind of issues, a timing issue. They're not going to be able to have urban services available at time of development right away. We may have to defer the certificate of occupancies or defer the overall approval for several years. So this is one of many that will be coming our way, at least for the next several years, because the developments are developing along our periphery, and we already know from our comprehensive plan and our modeling that we do not have the capacity in the majority of the areas that are along the periphery. So the conditions that you see here will be very common that we'll put on many other developments. And the question is, should we allow development, or at least preliminary plat approval, with conditions that they defer the development and there's an agreement between the developer and the city for maybe several years? Or should we delay the project entirely and say, come back until we have that? I think probably the former makes greater sense, as long as all parties are aware of that and we craft the development agreement to address that issue. So this will probably be very common.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have one other
Mr. Elkin.
question. Ed, are you comfortable with the 75 feet street width on 15th Street West?
Yes, I am. I left it so that the city engineer, we could look at what we have done in West Ridge 1. We required the 75. The project to the north, we need to look at our comp plan and see. I think our right-of-ways, our typical right-of-ways for a collector are 100 feet. So we may reduce that, but at this point, it's better to put the developer on notice that we may require the 75, and as part of negotiations and further review of the alignment, we may reduce that. But I've left that up to the city engineer to determine that as we move forward on the development. Instead of coming back and asking for it, it's easier to relinquish than gain.
Any other comments, questions? If being none, I'll close the public portion of this hearing and ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Graham.
I move that we approve the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning approve the rezoning petition as conditionally with the conditions noted in the application.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second that. Mr. Elkin. Any further discussion? In further discussion, I'd just like to say the conditions, they will be posted in the official minutes, so if anyone in the public really wants to read those, that'll be fine. We're not going to read them at this time. And also, I think the implication was there that further developers, that these conditions or types of the conditions probably will be coming up in the future with further developments. So they probably should take note. Any other discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Preliminary plat, recommend approval. Thank you very much. Item 2 on the agenda today is a special use permit application. Is to consider a special use permit to allow a group daycare facility at the Lighthouse Church of God located at 816 11th Street East. Property is zoned low-density residential and is approximately half an acre. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Yes, sir. How are you? My name's I'm Pastor Jack. I'm the pastor of the church there.
And your name is
Jack Wood.
Jack Wood, okay? And would you like to, let's kind of give us an idea of what you plan on doing? As
Well, at the
public
church
hear
there,
your
we have,
comments.
it's a two-story church, and at the bottom of the church will be the daycare facility there. And depending on I don't know exactly on the children's size. I know it's at least 12 to 18 that we plan on doing there. So, and I believe the fire marshal has came in and looked and has approved everything there for us to be there. So basically, we're waiting on you guys to say yay or nay to do this. So that's what we're waiting on right now.
I had one question for you, Mr. Wood, on
Yes, sir.
on the parking.
Yes, sir.
The parking places that you're going to use, are they a dual-purpose parking at the times you're going to be open? Will there be other events going on
No,
at the
sir.
church that
No, sir.
those dedicated parking spots will be
Dedicated parking
for
spots. Yes, sir.
your daycare?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Wood? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this special use permit application. Please feel free to come forward. Give us your thoughts. Being none, anyone from the commission wish to make further comment? Mr. Josephson, would you like to give a recommendation on this?
Certainly. Steve Josephson, city planner, and we worked with Reverend Wood on this and his wife on this application for child care. The conditions that are in here reflect the information that they provided to us. The number of children would be limited to 12, and the ages would be 12 weeks through 10 years, and the hours of operation are ones that they had proposed also. One of the comments we did receive was from the fire department that they did need an inspection, and it sounds like that's happened. The one thing after approval of this is they will need to work with county social services to get get their license for a child care. Given where the church is located, which is in a residential neighborhood, we find that this use is compatible with the area, consistent with the development pattern, and staff recommends approval subject to the 7 conditions listed in your staff report. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Josephson? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recommend the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed special use permit, subject to the conditions that are listed.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kovash. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommendation to approve. Thank you very much. Item 3 on our regular agenda is a rezone petition. To consider a rezoning petition from rural residential to low density residential. Site is generally located in the southeast quarter of Section 34, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 1 acre. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Fred Krashesnik here. I believe this is my call, right, Ed?
This is your call.
Okay. It's just to rezone Brown First Subdivision from rural residential to R1.
Mr. Chairman, I could just add some further ones to help out the applicant. The applicant talked to me about adjusting some boundaries A while back, several months ago, we found out that this is a remnant piece. It was probably in the county several years ago on the east side. It was rural residential, which kind of came to my surprise. I didn't think we really had too many of them, and it was surrounded all by R1. And I had told the applicant that you couldn't adjust the boundaries because rural residential had the minimum lot size of 1 acre minimums, and if they adjusted them, since they were below the 1 acre, they couldn't do that. But I suggested to him, I said, unless you are wanting to have horses on the site, there really isn't any advantage to have the rural residential destination, and it was my recommendation that they just go to an R1, which is compatible with everything around it, with all the surrounding land uses. They've decided to take that advice and move forward with that. They'll make some adjustments to some of the property lines, and this will enable them to move forward with that. But as city staff, we recommend approval. This makes perfect sense. It corrects an outdated zoning district and allows the developer to move forward on adjusting some lines if necessary in the future. So we would recommend approval of this.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Croton. I'd like just some clarification on, I've got two different notes in here about the size of the property actually that's requested to be rezoned. How many acres are you requesting for a rezone?
On the map that I received from you guys, it showed, I think,
Is that almost 8.5 acres?
yeah. You have blocked out the southwest corner of that, which I think that would be Joel Bless property. And I think that needs to be included. I had Joel's signature on this to move it also. If it's in rural, it needs to go to R1 also.
Mr. Colling, is that going to be clear enough on this, that those properties are included, that his signature on that is sufficient? And our description is clear.
If I understand the application, Mr. Krasinski, or Krashisnik, excuse me, owns the Braun subdivision,
Yeah.
right? And then there's another about acre lot that Mr. Bleth owns?
Yes,
And your application would be to include both of those properties in the rezoning?
yes.
So all of that block would be included in, or that block of land would be included in the rezoning. And I think once this comes to city commission, we will make sure that legal description includes all of that property.
Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't make really any difference to me about Joel's property. I just was, for your sake, it would be best to just do the whole, that whole block at once, I guess.
Yep.
But
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I just checked the map, and all of the Braun one would be included in that portion. That was noticed for the surrounding property owners. We'll just clarify that for the motion as it moves forward with it. I have no problem of that additional acreage that's next to it. It looks like, when you look at it, that it's part of that existing subdivision, but it's not, but it was noticed that way, and I would be in favor of having that included with this. It only makes sense.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
Mr. Krashisnik, can you tell us a little bit about what your plans are for the property?
there was one large lot on the west side that was about 2.4, maybe 2.5 acres. That is going to be split into half, so that really wouldn't be affected by this. There's one lot on the east side that was a little bit over an acre, but we were going to sell that at a little bit under an acre, split a portion of that off and add it
Okay,
into.
but you
another-
are going to actively market it?
Oh, yes.
Are you
Yeah.
building houses yourself, or
No.
you just
We're
going to
just
market the lots?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe Mr. Croton could comment, that street will need to be paved.
It's already in.
That street is paved?
It's concrete.
All right,
City water and sewers in and everything.
good.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
if-
Jackson,
we'll make
ask
sure it's
Mr.
paid.
Corton a question of,
Yes.
as to whether or not, do we anticipate this is going to come back as a replat?
No, they're going to come back. The lot that he referred to, Lot 1, they can do that as a lot split, you know, for our code that we have in our new regulations. The other one is just a lot line adjustment, so they would meet the intent of that one. He's looking at adjusting the side property line to give a little bit more to one property owner.
Right.
I think for them to build a detached garage and then shrink that down a little bit below 1 acre. So that would still fall within the lot split or lot combination portion of our current subdivision regulations.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition, please feel free to come forward. Anyone else in the commission wish to make comment? And I assume from Mr. Corton's comments, he recommends this. Mr. Josephson, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson staff. The only thing I wanted to add is, first of all, this is it's consistent with the future land use designation on our comprehensive plan, which shows it as residential, and also it is located within the urban service area. So the R1 zoning is a zoning district that's actually more appropriate for something that's in the urban service area, as opposed to the current RR. And as was stated before, it's compatible with the zoning and development pattern that's in the area. Therefore, staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Anyone have any comments or questions for him at this time? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed rezoning from RR to R1.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Jackson. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend. Thank you very much, Mr. Krishersnick. Item 4 on our regular agenda is a rezone petition. It's to consider rezoning from agricultural to light industrial. It's a site generally located in the southeast quarter of Section 22, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. And this site is approximately 1.5 acres and owned by Mr. Lee Catherine. At this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Thank you, Chairman. Commission, Sean Soren, Boundary Engineering. I'm representing Mr. Catherine on this project. It is a 1.5 acre parcel that does have an accessory structure on it. Has been zoned ag. He's looking to get it rezoned to LI, which matches to the property to the west and the zoning designations that are there. Looking to try and make some improvements on the property, and this is what he feels is the best direction for him to go with the current structure that's there.
Any questions for Mr. Soren at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Alpha?
what does he plan on doing out there, Sean? Adding on to the existing structure that's
I
there?
think he's
or-
hoping to add an office onto the existing structure. Yeah.
What are they using that structure for now? Cold storage, more or less?
Yeah.
When-
He does run a trucking company, I believe, and hoping to
When was
run
that
some of that
structure
out
built?
there.
I'm surprised that structure that this hasn't happened a long time ago.
Yeah,
Rezone.
you know, Mr. Josephson asked me the question yesterday about when the parcel was created. I did some research, and I found it did exist on November 1st of 1990. I didn't go earlier than that to see exactly what happened. I know that structure's fairly old, though it's not a new structure by any means. So the parcel's been in place for quite some time.
Mr. Torrance, so are you stating that the structure or the actual parcel was created in 1990?
I don't know if it was created, I know it existed in 1990. I didn't go prior to that to see exactly when it was split off from the section.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I don't have a problem with the rezoning, but I think that we need to take this opportunity to ask for a subdivision plat, because I think we need street right-of-way at this location. I think we need right-of-way on 40th to accommodate what that street's going to be. And I'm not sure that we shouldn't be getting right-of-way on the west side to extend, I think that's 4th Avenue East. I'm not sure what street that is.
4th Avenue.
And again, engineering staff can look at that. But I think we have to condition this approval on the need for a subdivision plat to address those two right-of-way things. I don't know, Sean, what you think about that. But I think this is our opportunity to do that.
You know, I haven't really looked at it from that perspective. I don't think he'd necessarily be opposed. There is some, I believe there'd be some concern if we take too much right-of-way, as the parcel's already relatively small, and if you're taking off of two sides, that could be an issue. But until we get into that, it's hard to determine how much that's going to be.
And I understand that, but I just think as we grow, we have to keep looking at those things on parcels like this. And the last thing is, I think there's a really good chance that within a year, there's going to be water and sewer right at the southwest corner of that parcel. I don't know that for sure, but I think as we improve 40th, I suspect water and sewer will be extended right to that intersection. So we'll need to think about that too.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Elkin.
Gene, what are the city's plans for 40th Street? Do they plan on upgrading that street?
Mr. Croton can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe right now it's the third priority for streets. And personally, I think we maybe need to look at it even harder than that. I think it maybe needs to be moved up. With the development of the Lions subdivision to the south, going to be significant traffic through there, and we really need to improve that half mile of street. How that will happen, how it will be paid for, I don't know those details, but I see it being improved within the next year to 2 years here.
Steve Josephson, city planning staff. A widening of 40th Street from Highway 22 to 4th Avenue East was identified in Chapter 12 of the comprehensive plan, and the project that was identified was to widen that length of road to 5 lanes. So it is listed in the comprehensive plan as a project. I think it was listed as being phase 1. I don't know if there's been any adjustment made to that, but in the comprehensive plan as adopted, there is a widening program in there.
So more right-of-way would be needed through that area, right?
I think I would defer to engineering staff on that, but it would appear that would be the case.
Okay.
And actually, to address the point that Mr. Jackson had raised, is we did want to propose an amendment to this that as a condition of approval, that any development that prior to any development activity on site, the property shall be platted in accordance with the city's subdivision regulations. Commissioner Jackson, is that the kind of condition that you had in mind?
Yes.
Mr. Josephson could make it real clear on that. In the comp plan, there's plans to take 40th and make it wider, up to 5 lanes.
Correct.
And that point goes to 4th Avenue. And is that the end point of the comp plan in reference to the widening of 40th? Or
Cor-
making it a 5-lane?
Five.
Or where does it end?
Okay.
At that intersection, is that it?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that. It's yet to be determined beyond that point. Looking probably 10 years down the road when that whole area, if that whole area fills up as, and to be consistent with the comp plan going all the way to 10th Avenue East, then it would make sense to continue that all the way through. The first phase, the one that we're talking about this morning, would probably stop at 4th Avenue, and then it would be several years until we get additional industrial development or negotiated that each one further to the east pays a fair proportionate share of that road in order to extend that. But it's very conceivable that that 5-lane road, if that's the case, I don't see it probably as a 5-lane. I see it more as a 3, but that's yet to be determined. If that's the case, then go all the way to 10th Avenue East. But at least to 4th Avenue, that would be the per the comp plan, that would be what we're looking at. Beyond that point is yet to be determined.
So you're saying north on 4th from that corner is not?
Going north on 4th Avenue
Right,
up
'cause that's
north,
on- yeah.
we would want to protect that the extension of 4th Avenue, yes, because that area is going to be industrial, and as you have existing roads, you would want to extend those into that industrial area, similar to what we've done further to the west. Along Highway 22, we have several roads that are leading up there as well.
Thank you.
As I was stating before, the staff recommendation was for approval. We had another condition in there that required the developer to pave the approach from 40th Street East onto the subject site and the general drive aisle to the building, and that the developer shall be required to provide landscaping on the site in accordance with Article 39.08 of the city's code. But I think that would be done, that would be part of it, if they're going to do any development activity, prior to any development activity taking place on the site. The condition that I read into the record today would need to be met, that they would need to go through be platted through the city subdivision process. So as was noted before, there is an existing structure on there. There already, I went out to the site and saw some semis currently parked on the site. The rezoning should bring the property into, it would allow the use that's currently, that's currently out there, along with other uses that are occurring on that roadway. And that's definitely the direction that roadway is taking, is light industrial uses.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
The only thing I'd say to that, Steve, is that if staff decides that 4th Avenue East should go north, then we may want to look at putting access on 4th Avenue East rather than on 40th. But again, I'd defer to staff on that.
Mr. President,
Mr. Colling.
one other issue you may wish to consider too is the annexation of that property and whether the city would want to annex that. It is immediately adjacent to city limits to the south. That first row of, I believe those are R1 lots there, are part of city limits. City limits is immediately to the southwest. I know the property is outside the designated urban service boundary in the city's comprehensive plan, but whether or not you would want to amend that and annex this property as this area of town grows is something the commission may want to consider as well.
I think Mr. Coley makes a good point.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Cruz.
I guess I got a lot of concerns with it. Mr. Catherine's been doing business beside my business for many years. We're talking about a lot of things that are going to change the way this man's done business in our community for many years on that parcel. I mean, annexation, taking right away on 4th, changing his access to approach to get those semis in and out of there. He's been there as long as I can remember. So I think he's trying to do this to clean the property up, and yet if we're talking about doing all these concerns with his property, why would he want to bring it in? Why would he even want to bring this back in front of us? Just a question, because he's only got an acre and a half there. And he's been doing that, parking his semis there and his cattle trailers and his water haulers and his trucks there for 20 years. I think we're going to really change the way this man operates.
Well, to address the issue, Mr. Tews, currently they're in violation. So ultimately they need to come into compliance. Unless they're somehow vested in, he could prove that he's had it for 20 years. I've been here 2 years, and there's a lot of times that there was nothing there. And over the last year, it's significantly increased. So, ultimately, it's just it's a zoning compliance issue. This is one way for him to come to compliance. I mean, he can go back to ag and remove the semis if he wants to, and have a horse trailer. That's fine. But if he wants to move forward with that, he needs to ultimately conform to our standards. That's all we're trying to do here. And that area is a very, 40th. Now that we're pumping money into the area, we're trying to clean the one up to resolve a lot of the issues. As you know, being next to the road, that road has to be paved. We have to deal with the stormwater issues and the rest, and that's a major road that we have in our city. He benefits from that as well. So I think it's fair to us to ask these requirements as we would ask for any of the newer businesses to come in as well.
I think it's good to hear all these questions and comments and implications on this property, and that if what is come to resolve here, Mr. Catherine can move forward with, and it'll be his decision whether he would like to do that. It's a good point, because the pressure on the roads, especially in that area, is immense, and there's some places that are forced to have roads that people really didn't want them there, and now we don't have a lot of choices there. So those implications and what Mr. Catherine can deal with, and if he wants to, we'll put forward to him, I think. So at this time, anyone else have any questions or comments for Mr. Soren? I'll give Mr. Soren a chance here to, if he'd like to say anything else at this time, Sean?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
We'll wait and see if there's any other comments.
Sure. Okay. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Bob Sivak, Dickinson Fire Department. Just a comment. To the west of Lion Subdivision, which is all residential, across 4th Avenue East, if I'm not mistaken, that whole area is light industrial. And Mr. Corton, am I correct in saying that? I believe that's a light industrial zoning now.
To the west of the subject site?
To the west of Lions.
Yes, that is. To the west of Lions is general industrial, then further it becomes light industrial, then general commercial next to the interstate.
The comment is this, Commissioners, that when we have industrial, light industrial, or general industrial properties directly across the street from a residential property, it allows uses that by the use, depending on what that use is, and we've heard it mentioned already, trucking. Now, depending on the types of trucks, it may not be an issue. But a trucking company, a firm that would handle hazardous materials or combustible or flammable material tankers could be allowed in that type of zoning district. It would fit the zoning district. It puts it right across the street from a residential zoned area and in direct conflict then with some aspects of the fire code that require definite spacing depending on the occupancy and depending on what's being done there. That brings it down to our only recourse then is through the building permit process, trying to recognize that that type of occupancy is going to be locating there and then conditioning that building permit. So on our end, we're going to have to be willing to do that. If a building is built speculatively and we don't know what it's being built exactly for and the building is sold later, a lot of times we miss that and we don't catch that possibly an occupancy. A wireline company, as an example, perfect fit in an industrial zone, has explosives, maybe right across the street from a residential occupancy, which comes in direct conflict with some aspects of the fire code and some aspects of the zoning code, possibly. It's just a comment to keep aware, to keep it on your radar, that when we locate industrial properties across the street from residential occupancies, certain distances may come into play as the areas develop, and sometimes those distances may not be able to be met because this is what's happened. That's all I've
Thank you,
got.
Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colling, on those issues, the current ordinances and fire codes would, even if it was LI, certain uses are by law prevented without even putting any restrictions on them. They're already in place, aren't they?
That's correct, Mr. President. The restrictions that Mr. Sivak referred to are in our fire code and would require some spacing from a residential area. So it may come to the point where even if we rezone this as light industrial, the development of the property couldn't go forward because of the spacing distances that may be required from a residential occupancy.
Sure. Thank you. Any other comments or questions at this time? This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who would like to make comment on this. Please feel free to come forward. Mr. Soren, would you like to make any other further comments on this?
You know, I guess just that, you know, the owner is looking to try and make some changes here to certainly come in compliance. I don't believe he knew he was out of compliance when he started doing what he was doing, and that's when he talked to me and asked to try and get this done. I don't know that he's opposed to necessarily a plat of the property. You know, as we look at it, I think there could be some issues about a 4th Avenue, you know, and moving access if that road's not going to go through. He's currently got 2 access points off of 40th. You know, at what point does he have to build 4th then and move his access point? You know, I think that's a question that he's going to have. And as I spoke with Mr. Josephson yesterday about some of the conditions, which included paving, you know, does that mean he has to pave his parking lot up to a gravel road, or is that, you know, in coordination with the development of 40th as it gets built? We would require that. I think those are some of the questions that I need to take back to my client and try and answer for him as well. So with that, you know, I don't have any more comments, I guess, regarding where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Soren. Anyone else from the commission wish to make any comments? Unless there's some legal issue, I think we could, I really believe we could move on with this and then let the property owner decide with his negotiations with the city, and if the property then would meet all the requirements that the city would like to see happen. That's my only comment. Anyone else have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to be reasonable with what we require here, but especially on the issue of the right-of-ways, you know, we have to look out for the city. That's why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look out for what's right, and I don't know what staff will say about 4th Avenue East. I think 40th is a given, but 4th Avenue East, just need to look at that. If it makes sense that 4th Avenue East should be extended north, then we have to address that now.
Yep.
But I'd make a motion if you are ready.
I'm ready for a motion.
I'll move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed rezoning from ag to light industrial to include the conditions shown, but also the condition that the rezoning is conditioned on successful approval of a subdivision plat.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kovash. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Rezone petition recommended. Thank you, Mrs. Zorn. Item 5 on the regular agenda is a rezone petition. To consider a rezone petition from ag to general commercial. The site is Lot 1, Block 1 of the 2nd subdivision, is located in the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 31, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 3.42 acres. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Sean Soren, Boundary Engineering again, on behalf of Todd Tews. This Tews second subdivision does have an accessory structure located on it currently. When the ordinance changed for the oil well requirements and the 300-foot spacing around that, I believe I've got a map that shows that oil well just south of this. It does take most of this lot within that, which made it pretty difficult to try and accomplish any residential type development here on the lot. With the shop, there's been some interest in potentially doing some type of commercial activity in the area, and that's why we're here today requesting a general commercial zoning of the parcel. I believe Myers to the east does show that they've got mostly commercial in the area. The oil well to the south takes up most of the property south of it from any type of a residential development, and seems to be a reasonable accommodation for that parcel to allow the owner to try and get some value out of the property.
Thank you, Mr. Soren. Anyone have any questions or comments at this time for Mr. Soren? Thank you very much, Sean. And before I get a recommendation or ask for one, I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment at this time on this rezone. Please feel free to come forward. Mr. Josephson, I would ask this time for you to make comment on this if you'd like to make a recommendation. Mr. Tews. All right. Mr. Tews is abstaining for
Steve
personal interest.
Josephson, Steve Josephson, city planning staff. Just to add on here, it's currently zoned agricultural. It is within the urban service area of the city's urban service area per the comprehensive plan, and does have a commercial future land use map designation. And Mr. Soren did bring up the issue of the well. The fact that much of this property is within 300 feet of a well, and that excludes a lot of uses. Even to rezone to commercial, just wanted to note that would even limit the kind of commercial activity that could potentially take place on that. Any place where there's any sort of a congregation, any place where people are, it's going to limit some of those uses. But it would seem that given the location of the well, that a commercial rezoning is more appropriate for that. Would be appropriate for that for that site. We did recommend one condition, and it's the property shall be developed in accordance with the City of Dickinson development requirements, including the paving of access to and from the site, as well as the paving of the site. Given that condition, staff recommends approval of the request with that condition. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. At what time would the paving take place? What's the time limit on that?
That would be when that would be as part of the development process, when there's development activity on the site.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Tews.
So Steve, if there's no activity or any future building on that site, he wouldn't have to pave, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
But it limits what they can do on the site for right now. So just because it's been rezoned to commercial doesn't mean that they can start using it for commercial purposes. In order to do that, they would have to go through our development process. Whether it's, I know that one of the things that had been talked about was You know, apparently Mr. Tews has a business that involves parking of trucks, you know, for his business out in the Belfield area, and that this would be a place where people could park their trucks if they lived in town. But even prior to doing that, they'd have to go through the development process, which would then require the paving of the access to and from the site, as well as the site itself. So it could not even be used as commercial until those improvements are done and they go through the development process.
You know if the well there is still active?
I believe it still is, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Josephson? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment. Please feel free to come forward.
That well is active, and it's a Conoco service well. Conoco has easement on that road, unlimited. It's they use it right now for injection, and they're in there probably 2 to 3 times a day. And I guess we can't. They won't let us do anything with that road until that easement is gone. So I don't know how long that. You know, it's as long as that injection well is active, and I don't think it's going anywhere, you know, as often as they're in there. So I don't know how I would pave it, or I guess I would have to work with Conoco on working that out with them. I don't know how they would do that with their easement. I don't know if I can pave it or if they'll let me. Because when I did pave my house, they had some concerns. They didn't want it paved because they were concerned about oil trucks coming in and breaking it up if they needed to come in and put a roustabout crew on that well. 2 or 3, it's probably, every year there's a roustabout rig on that site. They're constantly cleaning it out or doing something back there, so. So I don't know how that affects what I want to do.
That sounds like an agreement that, I mean, you'd have to get in there with Conoco and who they have the easement with, and the property owner, and everybody have to agree.
I don't think they would be opposed to it.
Sure.
But
As long as they didn't incur any risk or expense, they would
No,
let
they
you do
don't.
whatever you wanted.
they just want access.
Sure.
And that's all I had.
Thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Tews. Mr. Chairman,
Oh.
if I could.
Mr. Jackson has a question, Mr. Coos.
I have a hunch, correct me if I'm wrong, but as the Pinecrest development around you progresses, there's probably a lot of options as to how this piece of ground might get used a year or 2 or 3 from now. Is that probably true?
Correct.
You know, I think it's likely we'll see different uses out there.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Coos.
you.
Is there anyone else in the public who would like to make comment? Please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make further comment? Being none, we'll close public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kovai.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed rezoning from AGGC, subject to the conditions listed above. I believe there's one.
Thank you, Mr. Kovacs. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
A second by Mr. Elkin. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approved. Thank you very much. Item 6 on the regular agenda is a rezone petition. Let's consider a rezoning petition from agricultural to low-density residential. The site is generally located in the southwest quarter of Section 26, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 25 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner and members of the commission. My name is Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying, representing the owner of the subject property. This property is located about a quarter-mile east of the intersection of 10th Avenue and 21st Street East. As you said, it consists of 25 acres, and they're requesting a change from agricultural to low-density residential. This is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and it does blend well with the adjacent developments. To the north, south, and west, there's actually agricultural property in place, and to the east, there's an existing rural residential development. And further to the east, if you go about a quarter mile, is the Meyer development, Sundance Coves and Meyer Coves. The owner has a current plan to place 88 lots of single-family development on this property. We have met with the park board already, and cash in lieu was accepted for this piece. If you have any further comments or questions, I'd be happy to address them at this point.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Alkin.
Andrew, does this developer plan on building homes on this property himself, or is he just flipping the property? What is he planning on doing there?
A combination. He's going to develop part of the lots, and he's going to sell part of the lots. It is a local developer. He does have plans. He wants to get going soon. There are some issues preventing that right now, but as soon as possible, he'd like to start building these lots, and a portion of them will be sold.
Well, the reason I asked that question, I have a concern that so much of the time, a lot of the land that's surrounding this city, especially to the north and to the east, is purchased by developers, large developers, that really do not intend on building anything on their own.
Yeah, the owner is actually here with me. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that, but in our discussions with him, he has every intention of building on this property. He knows there's demand for this low-density residential development, and he wants to help meet that demand. He's a local developer. He wants to get going, so
okay.
I don't know if you need to add to that, Jason, or...
Good morning, Commissioners. Jason Frederick with Legend Homes and Blackstone Development, which is doing the project. The project consists of pretty much 4 or 5 local guys that are putting the project together. It'd be Legend Homes would be one of the builders in there. Venture Properties, which is Parker Platson and Chad Glosser. The lots we have verbally committed to, all but one of the builders is a local builder that have been here for 10+ years. So the projects I've done in the past, I mean, I've done State 2nd Edition. We've done projects over on the east side, Washington 4th. We've done over 100 lots over there. We have demand. We're platting these. You know, the plat didn't come forward with you today because we have some complications going forward on infrastructure that we're trying to work through. But our total intention is to build this out. Smaller lots similar to Washington 4th, what we did over there, smaller houses. There's a great demand right now. We're trying to, you know, get this going forward as fast as possible. We have verbal commitments from the builders, the local builders. Like I said, we have one Minnesota builder that's looking at maybe 10 lots in there, but other than that, there's about 40 lots that have spoken for, and they're all local people, so.
Well, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the fact of the matter is there's so much of the land, and you've seen it yourself, Jason, that
yeah, and
right now we're being surrounded and inundated by developers who are buying up all the property and not building anything.
And we see that too, and you know, it's hard for us to see all these plats approved right now and nothing getting built. I mean, there's going to be a definite demand for lots, and there's going to be a shortage. I mean, there's subdivisions approved in this town that are never going to get built because nobody's building them. So we have total intention. In fact, we wanted to start this spring and have them ready to go this fall, but due to infrastructure issues, we probably won't get on until 2014 now, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, Jason?
Yes.
Are any of these other plots that we've approved through these big subdivisions, are these guys selling lots to you?
We have met with Myers. Cost prohibitive, maybe a little bit. Some of the restrictions of the subdivisions are, you know, more than we want to see probably on. I mean, we have met with Myers. I bought some lots from Roars in the past, but you know, other than that, they're about the only ones that are putting any lots in right now. So that we're seeing, but.
What's available to you as a local builder for lots?
Right now, I think there's 7 or 9 lots that just came on MLS from in Diamond Acres. There's Myers, Sundance Coves has some lots available. Other than that, that's pretty slim. I think there's a few up in Cooks left. And then Roar's new subdivision they're talking out west is going to be, you know, available at some point. I don't know when that is, but it's a tight market. And I mean, me alone, I have 7 lots of right now that I've got left for the year. Typically, I like to go into the year with 20 lots, so it's,
How many houses a year are you averaging?
last year I think I built close to 25, so.
Mr. Friedrich, you have pretty much one set of plans where you intend on doing single-family dwellings, right?
Correct, yes. And like I said, we're keeping the lots similar to the Washington 4 subdivision. They're 7,500 to 8,000 square feet, so they would accommodate, you know, that 265 and under probably price range. You're not going to see a lot of big houses in that area in that first phase, so more starter home.
Mr. Chairman, I could also add to it,
Mr.
you know, we met with the applicant, Jason, probably several weeks ago. And as I mentioned earlier, as we move forward on projects, they're getting more and more complicated, and we're going to have to figure out ways to defer the public utilities, the sewer and water, as part of development agreements, and can we do that? And is there a desire to do that instead of just saying no, come back in 2 or 3 years? Their development will actually be the first one that we're going to propose. Legal has to look at it with respect, can we preliminary plat the project and defer with the developer knowing that they would not have utilities for several years? And can we do that? And we're looking at that as we speak, but this would be the first case in which, and if we could work out those issues, they would move forward with a preliminary plat. They would get their approval based upon the conditions, and then they would have roughly a year and a half or so to get all the infrastructure in, while the city is doing their very best on providing the utilities. The biggest hindrance on this project is the sewer issue. Sewer, right now, we have it as a task order at 10th Avenue East, is a lift station. That lift station, we're trying to get that developed as quickly as possible, because right now all the development up north and to the west all goes to that, and that lift station is very close to capacity, and we cannot add to it. And the earliest that's going to come online will be the latter part of 2014. So the development agreement will, in essence, be, you know, you could have your approval, work on all your infrastructure, get all that done, approved, and when that's online, then we could turn it on, and you can get your COs on some houses. So that's what we'll be negotiating with Mr. Friedrich to address those issues and bring that forward. That will be the first time that we'll move with that. I just wanted to give you a heads up, and right now we're looking at, can we do that? Is that possible to do it? That makes a lot of sense with respect to single-family lots that we need in the city. I wouldn't be in favor of this if it was strictly for multifamily, because we have so much of that available. We just need people to develop at single-family, to look at different ways to accommodate development as best we can during this crunch for the next several years. So I just wanted to give you that background.
Thank you. And so Mr. Cortana has made you well aware of that.
Yeah, we have met, so.
Good. Any other comments for Mr. Friedrich or questions at this time while he's here?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I would really like to see this subdivision go forward. I think we really have a need for this kind of subdivision in Dickinson right now. You know, I see a couple of detailed things with the plat that I think need to be addressed, but we're not addressing the plat today, only the rezoning. The sewer issues that Mr. Cretan refers to are really, they're pretty significant. But I really hope as a city that we can push this along just as fast as we can, and Mr. Friedrich is going to have to be involved with that, because they are significant issues. But what I really want to say is that I hope we can accommodate this as best we can, move along as best we can.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Gene on this. Here we have a local developer that really truly is developing, rather than having an outside developer who seems to be swallowing up. And a couple of them are. They're swallowing up and picking the city clean of land. And I agree. I'd like to see this pushed forward as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Elkin. Twos?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friedrich. Mr. Shank, have you got any further comments at this time? Is there anything you'd like to add to this
No, I don't.
discussion that we've
pretty
just
much
had?
covers unless you guys have anything else for me.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Schrank,
Oh.
Yeah.
I would just
Sure.
like to remind you of the requirement for some kind of conceptual water and sewer layout. That'll really be important on this particular plat.
Absolutely.
With the preliminary plat.
Yep, not a problem. We will definitely address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this, please feel free to come forward. This is a rezone petition we're talking about. Anyone on the commission wish to make further comment?
Mr. Chairman, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed rezoning from RR to R1.
Is there a second? There's a second by Mr. Tews. Any discussion? One discussion I'd add is that it's nice to hear the comments that we heard earlier on the first couple of items that come forward now, that we are trying to pair people with cities so we can do infrastructure, so we can move forward without incurring a huge cost and risk, and that we can actually promote a developer who wants to put some property up. Any other discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended. Thank you very much. This time we'll take a 5-minute recess. Meeting. Item 7, we're going to split that item into a final plat, and we're going to do a reconsideration of a previously approved rezoning petition. So, at this time, item 7 on our regular agenda will be to consider a final plat for Prairie Creek subdivision. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Good morning, Sean Soren, Boundary Engineering again. This is one I didn't realize I was speaking on, but I will do my best to try and represent Carl Best's plat as well as I can. It's been quite some time since the commission seen the preliminary plat for this. The engineer on the project has done a lot of work, has moved Prairie Creek Road because of the floodway, addressing some of those issues. I've been in contact with Parks and Rec regarding the bike trail along the drainage area there. I know previously it had that going through the floodway as well. They've taken that around. The one point to point out there is a section where it does go back a curb of Prairie Creek, just to stay out of the floodway and get around their stormwater, regional stormwater pond, and then get back to the drainage way in the back, back of the lots. I believe they're still in discussion with Parks and Rec about payment in lieu of land, along with some of the dedication for this pedestrian trail or multi-use path. It does have a block of commercial in the northwest corner of it. Along State Avenue does have some R3 zoning, 2 larger tracks for that. And then once we go to the east side of 17th, the north part went to an R2 zoning, and as you can see on the plat, it's larger lots. I believe there had been some discussion with Mr. Corton about doing that because of some uncertainty about the size of the buildings or structures they were going to try and put on there. And instead of trying to make lots and shifting those as the building came, we were going to potentially do some minor subdivision replats of those as the development plans came forward on that area. And then you can see the south portion or southeast portion of that has gone to an R1 development with single-family lots. There have been extensive work done on the water, sewer, street plans. I know Mr. Peck has sent several comments back to the engineer. I believe they've worked or have been working to try and address those comments and have submitted comments to those. I believe they've submitted plans. I know I got a set late yesterday that should have had that, so I don't know if the engineering staff's seen those here at City yet or not. But with that, I'd certainly try and answer any questions that the commission may have regarding this.
Any questions at this time for Mr. Soren?
Are we addressing the rezoning right now, or the?
Right now, we're going to do a final plat address. Did you want to do that first, or should we do it together?
It is your call, Mr. Chairman, if you want to do that. Typically, you would do the rezoning first before the plat, but it's your call, whichever way you want to go.
We will do, and with the recommendation of you and Mr. Colling also, we'll do the rezone first.
My question, Mr. Chairman, is whether the rezoning has been noticed and published as is required by law. It's not listed on the agenda, so I'm not sure whether that was done or not.
It was listed on the agenda. It's just not broken up in a bracket. It says for reconsideration of the rezoning and in the second sentence under item 7, and it was noticed as a rezoning and final plat in the paper.
And adjoining landowners were notified of the rezoning?
Absolutely. And I spoke to an adjoining landowner, he's not here today, about that, who was here originally and told him a little bit about it. So they've been aware of the change in the rezoning portions. The rezoning on staff side, we're definitely in favor of. There were some issues with the properties to the south about the R1. They wanted to have more R1 lots. Now there are more R1 lots on the south and the southeastern portion. They shrunk some of the R2s, and the R3 and the commercial are the same as before. So I just wanted to bring this back. I can't imagine the Planning Commission would have any additional concerns with this, but just for informational purposes. And there are changes, so technically you should come back and just make a motion one way or the other on the approval of it.
Okay. I know we had seen this before, and that was quite some time ago, and I do realize that to me, I think the significant changes were made as far as making sure there was a R1 introduced in this property, and that none of the higher density would be bordering anyone to the northeast of this property. Anyone else have any questions or comments at this time?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
This is another plat that I'd really like to see move forward. I think it really should. And it looks like a lot of the questions we had a few months ago have been addressed. I would agree with that. Mr. Soren, you sound like you're pinch hitting, but are you working for this developer now?
Light Color Johnson is still doing the majority of the work for the developer.
Okay.
I have been the local contact to be able to bring information to the city, and am stepping in on behalf of him today,
okay,
but not specifically working.
Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't vote against this rezoning request, although I would like to see even more R1 in here. This could be a really nice R1 neighborhood. We've had concerns, we have ongoing concerns about the amount of R3 we're developing in the community. And I think it would be really easy to move this away, a little bit less dense, and get some very, very nice additional R1 lots in here. I won't vote against it, but maybe Mr. Soren can suggest that to the developer, maybe, to at least take a look at that. Because it could be done very easily along 17th and along Prairie Creek Road.
Commissioner Jackson, I will say with the R2, that was some of the discussion that we had, and with those lots going big, was do you create single-family lots there, or do you create big ones, because that could be a multi-use area, and that was kind of the intent, and weren't sure at the time, and that's when Mr. Corton said, we'll just make it a big one, and then we'll figure that out, and of course, as you know, you can do single-family in an R2 as well.
Are they pretty much set to go forward with this, you think?
Yes.
And this meets the city's, there'll be no problem with infrastructure here. This one will be able to, it's going to be able to tie right in. There's not going to be a real problem about water, sewer, streets, curb, gutter.
This is
utilities.
the answer to your question, Mr. Chairman, this is an infill. Are there any problems? That's yet to be determined based upon our modeling, and we have to review the plans. There will be upgrades that will need to be done, cost share potentially, all that, and that's just the case for every plat from this point forward. So those issues need to be worked out, and we have sufficient conditions in order to address that. We do require a DA, so when ultimately the utility plans, the conceptual utility plans, and the stormwater plan have gotten to a point in which we could start negotiations on the development agreement, then we could address those issues. But yes, this is one I think we all could agree with needs to. It's a good development in that area. This is a nice infill development, but those issues need to be worked out, and I don't have a definitive answer because the cost may come back to the developer in which he is unwilling to pay or feels that it's we can't come to an arrangement and falls on the wayside. But that's going to be true with any development as they move forward. Those costs are going to be adding up with respect to the development side as well.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. I agree that it's a great infill area.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Kovash.
I don't know if this is the right time or if at final, but I'm a little confused, and I think Ed has had some conversations with James on this. But, when we first looked at this, the path was going to go right along the drainage, and now it's not. And there's quite a bit of, I'm not sure how much acreage that is there that is in green. Is Mr. Two's okay with this, the way that's like that? Because conversations with James, what I understand is that we were thinking now that we would take cash in lieu, and eventually that drainage, I would imagine, is going to belong to the city anyway. I think it was our hope to keep it along the city, or along the drainage, the path, rather than doing with this, but I'm just wondering if he's okay with this. I mean,
Well, I think in trying to work with the floodway as best we can, this is what this presents, trying to bring that back up. He is proposing, I believe, that the drainage or the floodway does go back to the city. The trail would come to Parks and Rec, and as you can see on the where that R2 lot is on the north, it does go back and tries to get back along the drainage. But to take it down in the floodway, there's just no room to try and deal with that. And at some comments, I believe, that may have come from, I don't know if engineering or Mr. Corton had mentioned about the Parks and Rec shouldn't be responsible for a trail in a floodway. And so that's when the changes were made.
okay. And I think you've had conversations with James. I'm not totally up on this, but okay.
Yes, I could add, Mr. Kovash. Talked to James yesterday, and because I let him know whenever the trail system was now going to be broken up because of the floodway issue, and he's going to bring back to the board, either accept it as is or maybe just do payment in lieu. And I think the latter is probably going to work better because we have a problem with the floodway, and you can't have trails through that, and then it's going to stop at that plat, and then we would like to have it continue all the way down to 15th, but that would involve a lot of studies to determine where that's going to be at. So at this point, I'm not going to speak for the Parks Board. Sounds like to me you'll probably just do payment in lieu. It probably makes more sense to do it that way. So.
And that is what I understood too. I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page.
But we have that condition before we go to City Commission. that the developer and you would have to come to an arrangement. Give me that letter or email, and then we'll move, as the other conditions are, to City Commission for the final plat. And hopefully that satisfies you.
Yes, I think it will be.
Thank you, Mr. Kovach. Any other comments or questions at this time? Anything else, Mr. Soren, you'd like to add?
Nope, not at this time.
Thank you very much. So, with the issue of splitting this into two parts, we're going to continue on then with this first part now as the rezone or an approved zoning that we're looking at again. Is there anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this? Please feel free to come forward.
Jim Flournoy, resident on Prairie Oak Drive. Neighborhood appreciates Gene Jackson's comments on keeping the density down, making that area more single-family dwelling residential, especially since we know we already have a huge impact going in on the the west side of State Street. And that's going to be quite an adjustment once they fill up all those apartments. So I would think that Gene is right on to keep the density to single-family dwellings on all of that, because the city's going to have quite an impact there anyway to take care of in roads once they get those apartments filled up across the street. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Forney. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to make comment? Please feel free to come forward. If being none, is there anyone else on the commission who would like to make comment? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this and ask for a motion to approve a reconsideration, if so be the motion, of the previously approved rezone.
Mr. President.
Mr. Grimm.
I move that we recommend approval for the rezone as presented or as recommended by staff.
Is there a second? A second by Mr. Elkin. Any further discussion?
Mr. President, does the motion include the one recommended condition that the rezoning petition would match the final depiction of the final plat as staff has proposed?
As depicted in Exhibit A? Yes? Yes, it does. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Rezone recommended. Now we'd like to go on with 7A, which will be a final plat for the Prairie Creek subdivision, generally described in the northwest quarter of Section 33, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. At this time, would you like to introduce this one, Mr. Corton?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, this is a final plat. As noted in the staff report, about this time last year, this came through. The commission granted a preliminary plat on it. Since then, there has been significant changes for the road alignment or road configuration, lot sizes, as we've talked about the rezoning as well. The original plat was well over 100 lots. They have significantly reduced the lots to 52. That being said, the R2 lots are big lots in order to factor in how they want to move forward with that. But that being said, there was clarification on the commercial to community commercial as well. Staff is in favor of this. We find the project better better today than it was a year ago. They have worked with us. There still are outstanding issues, and you would refer to the condition page on conditions 1 through 4. We feel as staff that those are satisfactory. Those issues can be satisfactorily addressed, and when they are, we will move forward to City Commission if the Planning Commission grants approval of that today. And I'm available for any comments that you have.
At this time, I'd ask if the party presenting the final plat would like to make any comments.
Just available for any comments or questions that the commission may have. I think I went through all the items that I had for this as well.
Do you know on this final plat with the R2s, do they have any idea of what they're going to do and when they're going to do it? What's going to be their input?
On the R2s, I don't know that they're sure exactly where they're at. I know that was part of the discussion, was there might be a mix of duplexes, single family within that. So we didn't know lot sizes, and that's where the suggestion came for the larger lot, and let's get that nailed down, and then we'll come in for a minor subdivision and replat those to accommodate what's there. I think they're looking at the market a little bit. They do have some multifamily up front, which has always been in place, I believe. That's not one of the zoning changes for this, but looking at what's across the street and what's potentially going on 21st with some of that multifamily use. I think there's some questions about single family versus a duplex in that R2 stuff.
I think you've answered my question there, because I was going to ask if their ability to respond to the market on that R2, if they need to, they have the ability to go with something different.
I believe that's their hope, is to try and target the market that's most needed.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Soren?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to bring up just to convey, Mr. Soren, to your developer, that I spoke to one of the potential clients on the commercial side, and they had asked, asked for my opinion, would I be in favor of some of the R3 to go to commercial? And with as much R3 that we have, I'm not going to ask the commission to talk about it tonight, but I would be generally in favor of that. So if the market does change in a portion of that R3 to become commercial along state, my personal feel is, depending on where it's at, I may be in favor of that. They want to do it just due to the amount of R3 that we have coming forward, that I think that we have an oversupply that's already in the pipeline. But overall, as from staff side, we're in favor of this, and it's a better project than it was a year ago, and we would recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other questions or comments?
Oh, one last question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Corton.
With the crunch that we have with development agreements, please convey that, after everything, all the conditions are met, then we can move forward on the development agreement. And that could take us a month or two. So I know that they wanted to get the final plat approved, know that that's fine. But I just didn't want the unreasonable expectation that we'd be able to get this turned over really, really quick. It's going to take some time, so please convey that to your developer, to Mr. Best, that it may take us a couple months to finish out that development agreement.
Okay, will do.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I have some discomfort, not with the plat, but with the number of loose ends it seems like there is in approving a final plat. And, if Mr. Corton is comfortable with that, I guess then we should move forward. But it seems that there are a lot of loose ends on this plat going to a final approval as we are today. There are two or three things that I think I need to take the time to mention. First of all, there are some errors on the plat, just some arithmetic errors and other things that need to be fixed before the plat is filed. We're showing a lot of easements on the front of the lot lines. And I think our subdivision regs say we want them on the back. And there are some proper exceptions to that. But generally, we need to remove those from the plat. The biggest thing I'm concerned about, and there's a chance it could affect the layout of the plat, is the sewer crossing 21st Street, and really ask you guys to take a look at that, because I think there's a chance that that sewer has to service some areas on both sides of the drainage way north of 21st. I don't know that, but that definitely needs a review before this plat is finalized. There's a chance it could affect the layout of the plat. I don't know, I'd like to ask Mr. Peck, is State Avenue, would we consider that an arterial, a minor arterial, or is that a collector? And what would be the right-of-way width that we're showing in our comprehensive plan? Do you know that offhand?
I don't know that off the top of my head. A collector route would be 80 feet right away in our comp plan. I'm not quite sure exactly how that matches up to our current subdivision code. I think our subdivision code actually might be looking for something slightly larger. If it's a minor arterial, then it would be 100 feet per the recently adopted comp plan.
Okay, and I don't know what it is either, but I'm looking at this 75 feet that we're asking for, and I think it's too much. I mean, it's not often that we say that, but I think this is too much, and there's no sense taking something we don't need. Now, if there is a need for it, if we're looking at a trail or something like that, then by all means. But the point is, there are things to review here yet, and if, again, Mr. Curtin is comfortable with us doing the final plat approval, so be it. But I think there's a lot of work to do yet.
Yeah, I can add some to the review. A pretty detailed review was given to the applicant last month, and as Mr. Soren had mentioned, it looks like a partial response had just come in yesterday afternoon. Obviously, the department hasn't had a chance to look at that. But there was a significant amount of issues raised with the sewer, specifically the one that crosses 21st and State. So we did look at that. We did ask them some questions about that, and like I said, I haven't had a chance to look at how they've responded.
Okay. Are you still comfortable going forward?
I am comfortable. As we mentioned to the applicant, you know, this has been out there for a year. They've made some changes. We're still some reviews that we're finishing up on, but in essence, this is placed on hold until until we've got all the issues to a point that we're very comfortable to move it to City Commission. I know that they at least wanted to know that that the final plat, in essence, the configurations and the rest, unless they need to be changed for utilities, would be approved by the Planning Commission, and then they're going to finish up and get all that done, and then have some security. They are running out of time, and as part of our subdivision regs, it did say that they have a year, so that's why I was willing to push that to City Commission. We're very close on a lot of the things to have those resolved. The larger lots for the R2 make sense to me. I don't know how many times we come back with replats on a replat of a lot, and I would much rather have a bigger lot than they come back when they sell it to somebody, or they have a definitive plan and then they come back and replat it once instead of several ones that we have around the city where you have 5 replats of a particular block, and it gets very confusing and the rest. So I'm comfortable with that. They know that they would have to come back with a minor plat. So to answer your question, I feel comfortable with this. As was stated earlier, we do need single-family lots. Not that that should be a factor that we should water down our regulations, but I think that if we could accommodate it by requiring everything to be done at City Commission, I think that that's a fair compromise at this point.
I have a question. Mr. Jackson, you made a comment about 75 feet being more than adequate for which street?
States Avenue.
States Avenue.
It's-
States
it's-
Avenue is a section line, isn't it? Isn't it an old section line?
Yes.
Has, at some point in time, did the width on that particular section line change as far as what right-of-ways were allowed, or on a section line?
This plat shows 75 feet on just one side.
Uh-huh.
So I believe it's a total of 150. I don't,
Okay.
depending on what's
All
on
right.
the other side.
That is correct.
So we've got 150 total feet, which is really big.
Lot, yes. That is adequate.
And if you like, you could just, you could leave that up to, you know, as we're reviewing everything and we get to the point in which we're comfortable moving it forward, that if you allow us the flexibility of looking at it and saying, okay, we only need 50 on your side, make it 50 instead of 75 when you come to City Commission. If you just include that in your motion, or at least confirm that, then we could do that, modify it if necessary. It's always better to have more than less, and we could look at that accordingly and modify it if necessary, if there's no need to have the additional right-of-way, if that's a concern of the commission today.
Thank you. I think conceptually it sounds good. I just, if there is a motion, I'd like it very clear on what conditions are going to be in that motion, and that engineering will see to it that there's a very clear definitions on the plat as far as description, measurements. Any other comments or questions? Is there anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this? Please feel free to come forward. If being none, we'll close the public portion, so now I would ask for a motion. Mr. Elkin.
I move to recommend approval of the final plat for Prairie Creek subdivision with the conditions that are listed.
There's been a motion. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kovash. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Final plat recommended. This time, on our last item on the agenda is a zoning text amendment. And I believe Mr. Josephson is going to present this.
Steve Josephson, City Planning Staff. If you recall, at the last meeting that we had handed out a draft of sign ordinance, and then this is a refined one. And at this point, I just wanted to walk you through this. We're still doing some internal review. We're still doing internal review, but I at least wanted to hit the highlights of this. And then when you get your next package, we hope to have it in time for you to review. One of the things that we wanted to do is to try and make the code easier to read. Currently, if you go through there are a couple of different matrices which describe in what zones, specific zones, certain signs are allowed in and which ones they're not. Also, there are a number of things in terms of sign height and the total area of a sign and square footage and so on. And the attempt here was to try to simplify that. So if you just want to walk through the code, we're proposing to add some definitions some definitions to this that were, some of this just brings things up to date. I've looked at a number of codes, sign codes from other parts of the country, and there are some proposals in here that are meant to bring these definitions up to date, to address issues, current issues now with signs, issues such as animated signs and electronic message signs. And then looking in the definition for monument signs and pole signs to actually propose the maximum heights of those signs in the definition. The definition of sign area is included. On page 6, just a simple statement of relation to zoning regulations, including in any planned unit developments that the sign that those districts will comply with all conditions imposed for that district in terms of signage. And then if you go to page 9, we have, this is where we start talking about, talking about the general regulations, basic designs elements for on-premises sign. Instead of breaking things down in terms of saying limited commercial, downtown commercial, although I'll get back to that in a moment, community commercial and general commercial, a lot of these design elements would be either for residentially zoned districts or for commercial and industrial zoned districts. One of the things I need to come back and revisit is looking at the downtown commercial, and having looked at the current regulations, I can understand why we want those limited. Keeping in mind that in the near future, we're going to be doing a downtown development plan, and I imagine that will address signage. That'll probably address signage too. So I think you'll see in any special districts or overlay districts, there may be some restrictions that are specific to that area. Defining in here for a maximum sign area that the aggregate sign area shall not exceed 1 square foot per each linear foot of building frontage facing a public street, but in no event more than 200 square feet for this is for 200 square feet of aggregate sign area. Discuss canopy and ground signs in there, including a fair amount of discussion about monument signs, which seems to be the trend in the country, is going away from pole and pylon signs and using monument signs as a means of identification. And this is particularly true with the development of of malls and other multi-tenant tenant developments, and also in terms of the visual aspects of having monument signs. One of the things that we also included in here is under design features, is that all permanent signage must be designed to be architecturally compatible with the building design on site. So work some of those architectural elements in to the sign. And one thing I'd like to call your attention to is near the end of this proposed ordinance on 19 is the actual layout of what a sign plan would look like. I understand that under our current commercial permits that we do, the city does request that a sign plan be submitted, and this just calls out the kind of detailed information that a developer would provide in terms of showing where the different ground signs would be, a sign plan, building signs, so that you could look at that. You could look at all of that and see how that works together. So this is an opportunity to present this and give the commissioners a chance to look this over and provide any comments to staff. As I said, we're still in the process of internal review. I know some of the comments that I've received in the past have been about, sign height and sign size. Making sure that signs are still visible, and yet that that it include the architectural features on it, and that signs not obscure the site, obscure existing businesses and other buildings. So we have an opportunity now. As I said, we're still doing internal staff review, and what you may see in about a month's time, there will probably be some changes to this, but it's an opportunity the idea is to try to simplify this so that it's easier to read and bring it and to meet some of the current codes in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. I have a couple comments, but I encourage everybody to get your comments in on this. I would like to see this go overboard, other than we leave something out. Just 2 days ago on the news, there was a fellow getting fined $300 a day for putting up flags at his place of business because he could have 3 flags of certain types that were not prohibited, but he could not add other flags, same height, whatever. They weren't offensive, but it was against the ordinance. And also, the offensive lighting on signs, to me, is an issue. And I had a question on what is a non-attached sign? Where does that fit in this? Because I think we have to imagine everything possible if you're going to write. What if someone has an electronic sign or a floating sign, not attached to anything? Is that issue brought up here anywhere?
You mean like a banner or something?
No,
or no?
non-attached.
Non-attached.
Floating in the air.
Floating sign in the air like a balloon?
Yeah, maybe whatever. Imagine that. Say my church across the street decides to have a floating sign 50 feet above the parking lot going around and lights on it. Is that allowed?
More than
or
likely,
prohibited?
that would be just as a temporary.
Well, to address that,
sign, so.
there's interpretation that could be done. We'd allow some temporary signs, but the code would say that if it's not classified, it's not described, it's prohibited.
It's prohibited.
Okay. So a balloon sign or some kind of sign that levitates, or whatever you're thinking.
Well, I'm like I said, I think we ought to include everything we can.
Just make sure we get that in the paper that the chairman talked about levitating signs in the future, but those ones would be prohibited.
Sure. I mean, how far up do we go? At what point does the FAA rule banner behind an airplane?
You know, if you have a sign up that high, I wonder how effective it's going to be.
Right.
So
It may not be effective, but it may be offensive.
Mm-hmm. I've typically seen, if there have been balloon signs, they've typically been temporary signs that are,
Sure.
They're usually associated with some sort of event or a grand opening, and they're limited as to the amount of time that they can be there, and they've got to go through permitting process before they can get a temporary permit. So
I appreciate the levity, and but I do believe that's better to include anything and everything you can if you miss something.
But as Mr. Corton said, if it's not mentioned in here, it's prohibited.
Okay, good.
Now, that brings up a question, and I would like to get a general feel from the commission. We have the temporary ones that advertise everything under the sun, the ones that are the billboards that are on wheels, that they park on the site. Technically, all those need to be, those should be a temporary use permit. We have not done it just due to staff enforcement and everything else. Is there any direction from the commission to prohibit those? Many jurisdictions say we don't want those at all, regardless, irrespective of what it is, unless it's a civil message, like something that the commission and everybody would support, something for the JCs or something that's bettering the community, but it's not directed for a private use or a business. I originally mentioned that, a year and a half ago when I came here. I'm not a big sign person myself, so I will let that be known. But I would like to see if there's any consensus to regulate those or just keep it as is. That's a community perspective issue, and I'd like to get a feel from the commission. Do you like them? You okay with them? Neutral on the issue? Want to limit them? That kind of an issue.
If anybody would like to make comment now and then further make comment later is fine. Just a short comment. I'd like to see them limited, really limited.
I'm
Anybody
sorry.
want to jump out or
I'm sorry, what did you say?
step on
Mr.
anybody's feet?
I'm sorry, what did you, I missed that.
I would like to see those really extremely limited.
Mhm.
I just, they're eyesores.
Well, what happens is they stay and stay and stay, and they're reused, and they're all over the place. But I'm also sensitive on a community that I have my perspective, much the same as Steve. And our sign code is our sign code, and unless there's a desire to change something, I think just leave it intact instead of just changing it because, we could change that. So I'm cognizant of that. So please provide your comments specifically about that issue there. And if there really isn't a consensus from that, I'm not going to move forward with any kind of amendment to that. But every community addresses signs differently. And there's no right or wrong. That signs are a freedom of speech issue and the message issue, but the regulation of the height and location and the rest can be done. So it's an issue, it's a preference issue on every community. It has to make a determination.
Right.
I agree with Mr. Cortana. I mean, as far as personally, I don't like them, but I do think it is what the flavor of the community wants. And if the community wants to tolerate them and put up with them, and it's their wishes, then I mean that's something the community, should. It should be a consensus from the community of what they want to tolerate in signs and their usage.
Okay, well, I look forward to getting your comments, and you should have something in the next packet that we can, that we hope we could move towards some sort of action on.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Josephson.
Okay, thank you. And if we need more time to work on it, if we get a lot of comments and we need more time, that's fine, because once you adopt it, that's what, that's what you have. I just think looking at this code that we can simplify things so that it's easier. It's easier for, for staff to use and the sign people, developers to use, and the public, so that, it's just easier to use. And
Well, I think we've
know
had
what to
adequate time by the next meeting, or when you feel comfortable coming back and saying this is it. We will all have plenty of time to comment to you, and so we should look for a final product soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other business that anyone would like to bring forward? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Mr. Kulash, thank you. All in favor?